Ever feel like there are two of you kind of duking it out up there?
Yeah, like one saying, let's go for a run, and the other's all, nah, let's just binge watch that show.
Exactly. And get this, today's deep dive is exploring whether our brains might actually be more divided than we think.
We're talking consciousness, folks. The big one.
The big one indeed. We've got a stack of fascinating case studies lined up for you, all exploring what makes you, well, you.
And we're not just wading into philosophical waters here. We're going straight to the source, the brain itself.
Right. And we're diving right in with a bang, or should I say, a piercing. It's 1848, and Phineas Gage, a railroad worker, has a rather unfortunate encounter with a tamping iron.
Yeah, those things you use to pack down explosives. Not exactly known for being gentle.
You got that right? Well, this one went straight through his skull.
Now, what makes Gage's case a cornerstone isn't just that he survived, though. That's pretty wild in itself.
It's that he underwent a total personality 180 afterwards.
He went from reliable, efficient,
To, well, let's just say not quite the same guy. This wasn't just a bump on the head. It was a turning point for how we understand the brain.
See, before Gage, the brain was this big mystery organ.
Like a black box. No one knew what was going on in there.
Exactly. But his case, along with later studies like Broca's work on language impairment, gave us a huge clue localization of brain function.
So instead of the brain being one big blob where everything happens everywhere.
It's more like a high-tech machine, specialized parts for specific jobs, language processing over there, motor skills over here, even personality quirks tucked away somewhere.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into consciousness being, well, divided?
Now that's where things get seriously interesting. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, Dr. Roger Sperry and his groundbreaking research on split brain patients.
Split brain, as in their brain hemispheres were surgically separated.
You got it. For medical reasons, they had the connection between their hemispheres snipped right down the middle.
So instead of constant communication between the two sides, it's like someone drew a line.
Essentially, yeah. And what Sperry found through some ingenious experiments was that this separation didn't just mess with communication. It seemed to create two separate spheres of awareness.
Wait, two separate consciousnesses in one head. That's where we're going with this.
Buckle up, because that's exactly where Sperry's work leads. We're talking bizarre behaviors here. Imagine a guy trying to hug his wife with one arm while the other's trying to shove her away.
That's an awkward dinner party.
Or picture a woman picking an outfit. One hand pulls a dress off the rack, the other chucks a completely different one in the mix.
Okay, that's not just different fashion sense. That's like two different sets of wants battling it out.
And that's exactly what Sperry's research revealed. Each hemisphere, on its own, seems capable of independent thought, feelings, even wants that clash with each other. He wasn't just mapping brain function anymore. He was making us question what it means to be a single self at all.
So we've gone from this idea of one unified consciousness to like two separate entities hanging out in our skulls. It's like our brains are running their own little sitcom up there.
And we're not even in on the joke half the time.
Exactly. But how did this whole consciousness thing even come about? Did our ancient ancestors just suddenly wake up one day?
Right. It's not like we went from single-celled organisms to debating philosophy overnight.
So no sudden lightning bolt of consciousness then?
Not quite. And that's where Rupert Glasgow's work on the minimal self comes in. He suggests thinking about consciousness as more of a spectrum, not just an on-off switch. Even the simplest organisms, he argues, show a basic form of awareness.
Hold on, are we saying bacteria have existential crises now?
Maybe not full-blown existentialism, but think of it this way. Even bacteria can sense their environment, right? They react to stuff, make decisions based on those reactions. There's a basic knowing there in how they interact with the world around them.
So they're aware of what's going on, but it's not like they're sitting there reflecting on their place in the universe.
Exactly. And as organisms get more complex, so does that level of awareness. Glasgow even suggests that early RNA molecules, the very building blocks of life, might have developed a kind of primitive ego.
Now that's getting pretty wild. We're talking about molecules competing for survival. And somehow that ties into the very beginnings of consciousness.
It's about that drive to survive, to replicate. That drive is at the core of all life, really. It's a long way from our human experience, sure, but it speaks to the very roots of consciousness, this urge to exist maybe even before the first nervous systems popped out.
So it's like this drive, this will to exist, is woven into the fabric of life itself. And as life goes on evolving, that drive, it just gets more and more complex.
Exactly. You start to see more sophisticated senses, richer ways of perceiving the world, allowing for more nuanced interactions, which eventually paved the way for, well, us. Central nervous systems, brains, the whole shebang.
It's like building a house, brick by brick. Each sense, each new connection in the brain adds another layer to the experience of being, well, alive, of being aware.
A perfect analogy. But with the human brain, something truly remarkable happens. We didn't just build a bigger house, we added a whole new wing, one dedicated to time travel.
Time travel. Okay, now you've got my attention. Are we talking about hot tubs and DeLoreans here?
Not quite. I'm talking about our unique ability to mentally project ourselves into the future. This is what Mikio Kaku, in his book The Future of the Mind, calls Level 3 consciousness. We're not just aware of the present, we can actually imagine possibilities, consequences, all those what-ifs life throws at us.
So instead of just reacting to the world, we can play out different scenarios in our heads, almost like running simulations before making a decision.
And that's a key part of what makes us human, that ability to model the future. It's what allows us to plan, strategize, make decisions that take into account not just the now, but what comes next.
Our brains are like these prediction machines, always trying to figure out what's coming and how to act on it.
And this future modeling, it's not just about practicality either. It's deeply connected to our emotions, how we interact with each other, even our sense of humor.
Okay, I'm curious. How does my love of a good dad joke fit into all of this?
Think about how humor works. You set up an expectation and then, bam, you subvert it. That unexpected twist, that's your brain's future modeling system getting caught off guard in a good way.
So my brain's always building these little models of how it thinks things should go.
Yeah.
And when those models go hilariously off the rails, I can't help but laugh.
Exactly. And this goes beyond humor. Think about the stories we tell, the gossip we share, the way we analyze social situations. It's all part of this dance between our experience in the moment and how we project ourselves into the future.
Like our brains are constantly trying to connect the dots, creating a narrative thread from our past experiences through the present and into all those what-if futures.
And speaking of narratives, there's one final story or case study that really highlights how crucial memory is to this whole thing.
So memory, it's not just about that awkward photo from high school graduation. It's the key part of how we experience, how we understand the world around us.
Couldn't agree more. And to really grasp how powerful memory is, well, we can look to this guy, Henry Molaison. He's known as HM in the world of neuroscience.
Right, HM's story, it's fascinating but kind of sad too. He had surgery for epilepsy, but it left him unable to form new memories.
Imagine waking up every single day like it's the first time. No recollection of what you did yesterday, who you talked to.
It'd be like living in a constant loop, cut off from all those experiences that make you, well, you.
Exactly. And his case, as unfortunate as it was, gave us this incredible window into the hippocampus, that part of the brain deep in there shaped like a seahorse. That's where those short-term memories get processed, turned into long-term ones. And his hippocampus wasn't working right. He was trapped in the present moment.
So he's got all these pieces for consciousness, right? He's aware of things, he's reacting, but he can't build on them. Can't turn them into a story, a continuous experience.
You got it. HM's case shows us how crucial memory is, not just for knowing who we are, but for learning, for growing, even just navigating life as it happens. Memory is woven right into the fabric of consciousness.
It's like memory is the framework we use to build our understanding of the world. Speaking of building and frameworks, though, there's this big question we haven't tackled yet. Free will.
Yeah.
Our brains, they're these amazing machines, right? Different parts for different jobs. And if they're making choices before we're even aware of them, where does free will fit in?
The age-old debate. It's had philosophers and scientists scratching their heads for centuries. On one side, you've got determinism. Every event, every thought, every action, it's all just a result of what came before it, like a chain reaction. So if our brains are just neurons firing, responding to stuff, free will, in the truest sense, it gets kind of shaky.
So we're basically slaves to our biology.
In a purely deterministic world, you could say that. But then there's this undeniable feeling we have. We make choices, we're in control, it feels real.
Right. That feeling of agency, even if it's all an illusion, it feels pretty darn convincing.
And this is where Michael Gazzaniga, another big name in split brain research, offers a really interesting take. He says, sure, free will might be an illusion in the strictest sense, but that doesn't let us off the hook for responsibility.
So even if we're just following our programming, we still have to act like we have a choice.
Think about it. Our laws, relationships, everything's built on this idea that we're in charge of our actions. that we make choices and we deal with the consequences. And that shared belief, even if it's an illusion, well, it's a powerful one. It shapes how we behave, how we interact with each other.
So it's like, okay, maybe the brain is calling the shots, but who's writing the script, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those questions that might not have a clear answer, but just thinking about it, looking at these amazing cases, that's what makes all this so fascinating.
And as we've seen today, from brain injuries to split brain experiments, even the tiniest building blocks of life, figuring out what makes you you is a wild ride.
Makes you wonder what your own brain's up to right now, trying to make sense of all this. What new connections is it making as we speak? Well, one thing's for sure, this deep dive into consciousness, it's been a trip. We've had mind-bending discoveries, thought-provoking questions, and hey, that's what we're here for. So until next time, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you on the next episode for another dive into the mysteries of our world.